so that Thank you. We can sort of get started with the technical parts of the cooperative space in December and then continue it through the next year. So far we've talked about, we've had our groundings, we've talked about Black feminisms and cooperatives, we've done the cooperative gallery walk, we spend a lot of time doing some thinking around capitalism and solidarity economies in many different ways. And so now we're going to take all of that and apply it into the technical components of starting a cooperative. And so I'm really glad that we have our colleagues, Benjamin and Deanna, this morning to walk us through that. And so Benjamin Tsai, as the director of the Shared Ownership Center at Nexus, Benjamin helps develop and implement strategies of community wealth building. Taking an ecosystem-wide approach, he works with an array of partner organizations to create a more inclusive and sustainable economy. Benjamin specializes in providing technical assistance in real estate, cooperatives, nonprofits, and worker co-ops. Their goal is to create democratically governed enterprises that are vehicles for community self-determination and shared economic benefits. Benjamin has over 20 years of experience in the cooperative and nonprofit sectors, working to build a more collaborative and sustainable society. He got his start helping to co-found the Hub Bike Hub Co-op in 2002 and served as the CEO and development coordinator. After playing multiple leadership roles that facilitated 15 years of growth, Benjamin left the Hub and began consulting for a variety of Minnesota businesses, co-ops, and nonprofits. They joined Nexus in 2019 to provide services for businesses transitioning into worker cooperatives. Since then, Benjamin has helped expand the program to include startups and organizational models that support community ownership of real estate. So happy to have you here, Benjamin.
Yeah, hey everybody, and thanks for the very thorough and introduction.
And I want to welcome Deanna Siegel Garcia, also with Shared Ownership Center. Deanna joined Nexus Community Partners in February 2023 as a communication specialist, where she managed Nexus's social media channels, monthly newsletters, and collaborated on internal projects. In May 2024, Deanna joined the Shared Ownership Center as their program manager. In this role, she supports the local fund, employee-owned cooperatives, and real estate investment cooperatives in the Twin Cities. Deanna previously crossed paths with Nexus while at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs and the J. and Rose Phillips Family Foundation Miracor Vista C3 program. Deanna's background is in urban planning, philanthropy, DEI, community organizing, and the arts. Since relocating to the Twin Cities in 2016, she connected with various organizing circles, such as If Not Now, Twin Cities, and Mobilizing Neighbors Against the Slumlord. In 2017, Deanna joined Pangea World Theater as part of their Arts Organizing Institute, AOI, and in 2023, reconnected with Pangea for the Seeding Change Institute to develop a continuation of AOI. For about 5 years, she worked with Minnesota-based family foundations and supported the Heading Home Minnesota Funders Collaborative. Deanna found a love for podcasting by documenting local urban planning projects and their impacts on past and current residents with the Money, Power, Land, Solidarity podcast. She has a Bachelor of Arts from Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and a Master of Urban and Regional Planning from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. In Deanna's free time, she appreciates interior design, forest bathing, and horrible reality television. Welcome, Deanna. Grateful to have you here.
Thank you. I have never heard my bio read to me, so thank you for that. I'm also recovering from a cold, so if I mute myself randomly, I might be coughing or sneezing, and I don't want that in your ears. Yeah, happy to be here. Hello, North Star.
All right, thank you. And we'll pass it over to you both then.
All right. Well, I think we have a slide deck that we'll just up, and I think Deanna is going to kick this off. Is that right?
Yeah. Everyone can see it. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, great. Hello everyone. We're representing the Shared Ownership Center today. And Yeah, this is our agenda. We're going to do a brief introduction to co-ops. We'll then do a deep dive on worker co-ops, where we'll tease apart also some of our services and focus on startups, so new co-ops and transitions, where the owner is selling to the employees or transitioning to a co-op. We'll look at some other types of co-ops that we thought might be more relevant to some of the folks in North Star. And we have to do a plug for the local fund. We have to. And then we'll hopefully have time for Q&A, but please put like questions in the chat. I can't see it on my screen, but Nicole and Liana, I invite either one of you to just interrupt us with a question, or for anyone to just unmic themselves and ask us directly. So the Shared Ownership Center is a team of consultants, excuse me, that support Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities by developing real estate, investment cooperatives, and worker-owned cooperatives. Our mission is to build community wealth through democratically owned enterprises that broadly share economic and social benefits. All right, this is our mighty team of four. Benjamin is the director of the Shared Ownership Center. Christina is our cooperative finance developer. I recently joined as the program manager, and Patty Viafra is the director of the Worker Ownership Initiative. Excuse me. All right, what are cooperatives? So our definition is a legal entity that is democratically governed and focused on meeting common needs. Use of the co-op determines what type of co-op it will be. So they're typically for-profit businesses. They're owned by members that use the co-op to provide them a service, and members benefit from services provided, potential discounts if that's like their structuring of wholesale bulk buying, and profit sharing or patronage. Members have a vote in how the co-op is governed. So these are some of the different types of co-ops that we broke down. Farmer producer. So an example is farmer sharing a storage and processing facility. Financial and savings, like a credit union. Consumer, buyers club. I think typically I think of like the Seward grocery store co-op in the Twin Cities. But there's also like 612 Sauna, which is like a co-op of people that they pay membership and then benefit from a sauna experience. So that's also in the Twin Cities. Real estate, it's Benjamin's domain. Business, an example is businesses owning a shopping mall together, and then worker and employees owning the businesses they work at. So that's what we'll be diving into. Okay. So these are the 7 international co-op principles derived from the Rochdale Principles and the Rochdale Society of Equitable Pioneers in 1844. The International Cooperative Alliance still has these as like a guiding principles, and they're useful. But yeah, also like these are documented principles, and I know that y'all like kind of dived into history of co-ops. Co-ops existed before documentation and etc. So open and voluntary membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for community. So yeah, we wanted to tease apart our co-ops, for-profit or nonprofit. Generally, they are for-profit. If a nonprofit wants to govern like a co-op, that is called a self-directed nonprofit. If you haven't looked into the Sustainable Economies Law Center before, we'll share the slide deck, and this links to their page about co-ops and or nonprofits operating as a co-op. But in Minnesota, a co-op is incorporating as a 308A or 308B. In contrast, nonprofits are 501c3s. Other entity types can also operate like a co-op, like a limited liability company. Yeah. All right. And now Benjamin will take over.
Yeah. So we wanted to try to break down sort of how co-ops are governed. So this is a diagram that shows three different kind of groups or structures in a co-op. You have fundamentally, you start with your membership. Those are all the people that co-own the cooperative. And typically in a simple co-op, they each get one vote in this example, in this diagram, they each get one vote to elect a board of directors. And that board is kind of the oversight committee for the co-op. It can hire a manager or executive team to do sort of the day-to-day operations. Because as you know, if you're familiar, the board is kind of going to be a little more hands-off the day-to-day stuff. Their role is really long-term strategic planning, like annual budget oversight, and sort of the longer term work of making sure the co-op is adhering to its mission and sort of what it's set up to do. And then, so they might hire that manager executive team to do the day-to-day that is sort of basically that is there to serve the membership. And that service will really depend on what kind of co-op it is. But for example, your classic grocery co-op or consumer co-op, they typically do have a manager or executive team that kind of hires all the other staff to provide the food for the membership. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit of the governance structure. Next slide. As far as the benefits, there are numerous, but I think I'll highlight the ones that really we find most important. It's all about local control and the local economy. They're really, because they're rooted in the membership. These co-ops should be based locally typically. And then the next point is really about worker co-ops specifically. So it doesn't actually apply to all the different co-ops, but co-ops in general are more resilient in economic downturns, according to the research. And co-ops give a voice in decision making and access to information to all the members. Oh yeah, this slide is specific to worker co-ops. I just read the title. But trying to think of co-ops broadly, of every different type of co-op that we kind of brought up earlier. I think the key points are sort of that local self-determination, local economy, and decision-making run by the members. Next slide. As far as financial risk, let's say, for example, you all want to start a co-op. The co-op is basically a type of corporation. And so members do enjoy a limited liability protection, barring fraud or grievous misconduct. So in essence, that means if the co-op, let's say, gets a loan and goes to buy a building or something, it's the co-op that is liable to pay off that loan. It's not the members. So the co-op is operating as its own entity. And that's what kind of creates that limited liability protection, is that the co-op is taking on all the liability, not the members, at least for the most part. There are ways to not have liability coverage, but we won't get into those details quite yet. So with that liability coverage, typically the maximum financial exposure from any particular member is just going to be whatever money they put into the co-op, plus any profit sharing they might have earned that hasn't been paid yet. So if there's a member fee or a membership buy-in of, like at a grocery store, $100 or something, worst case scenario, you might lose the $100, but you're not going to get like sued or, brought into bankruptcy proceedings or anything like that. Sort of like buying, if you bought stock on the stock market and those companies go belly up, you're not personally liable for what's happening in those companies. So it's probably not the best metaphor, but it's sort of similar. And then lastly here, the board determines how business losses, if any, are treated. Usually they're absorbed by the business, aka the co-op itself. All right, next slide.
Okay.
We're gonna do a deep dive on worker co-ops. Yeah, is that you, Deanna?
Yeah, I'll be doing the next couple slides. Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah, worker co-ops. All right, they are democratically owned and democratically controlled. Members own the co-op. Member owners share in profits, patronage. Member owners have transparency to finances. Members have a vote in the governance of the co-op. One member equals one vote, regardless of how much investment you may have in the co-op. Doesn't mean you get more votes. Members elect the board. Members vote on other critical decisions as defined in the bylaws. So this is hot off the presses. This just came out yesterday. So it's nice to update this map from the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives and Democracy at Work Institute. So this gives like a very kind of brief graphic of the overview of all the co-ops that they interviewed for this report. So 751 known worker co-ops. But they estimate that there's probably closer to 1,300 worker co-ops in the United States, and including Puerto Rico. Yeah, so you can see Bay Area, like New York. I guess you can't see my mouse. New York, New England, rural US are the biggest clusters of co-ops here. So I'll throw some numbers at you on the next slide. So out of this report, and again, that's linked in the slide deck, majority of employees surveyed are Hispanic and Latin, 52%, majority are white, 54%, Black and African American, 28%, and majority are women, 74%. They compared pay ratios of co-ops to conventional for-profit businesses. Lowest paid worker to the highest paid worker. So 1 to 1.45 for co-ops, whereas conventional businesses, it's 1 to 344. So that is a stark difference between them. Majority are startups, 69%, whereas 31% are conversions or transitions. And the top 5 industries of co-ops right now are food and beverage, like bakeries, restaurants, business support services, agriculture, so like farming, cleaning services, and engineering and manufacturing. Gross revenue, again, of all surveyed, is more than 483 million. And the largest worker co-op in the US is in the Bronx, the Cooperative Home Care Associates, where they have more than 2,000 worker owners. So what are member roles? All eligible employees can apply for membership. So if co-op's been around for a while, right, not a startup, and they're hiring an employee like a W-2, there's like an incubation period before they are invited to join, or if they choose to join. So that could be a couple months, and once they are, then they're a full member owner. But for operations, there are members that do day-to-day business activities. Membership is voluntary. Not all staff need to be members. So a co-op can have hired staff, W-2 or 1099, like contract work. The governance, they elect a board of directors, and their focus is more like strategy, big picture. And they can vote on certain important issues as defined by their articles and bylaws. So depending on how the decision structure is within the co-op, the board of directors can act with some autonomy. And then back to you, Benjamin.
All right. So as far as, how is membership structured? Typically, worker co-ops set a minimum requirement to be eligible to join as a owner of the business. It's really customizable, but any fair and equitable criteria can be used. Couple scenarios or examples are such as, having worked at the co-op for a certain amount of time. That's like the super common one. Most co-ops, it can range from like 6 months to a couple of years where you have to have worked there before you're eligible to apply for ownership. And then oftentimes, in conjunction with that, you're obviously doing a lot of different work trainings, that you have to complete a certain curriculum so that you're ready to be an owner, so you know how the business works and you can help make sure that it's operating successfully. Next slide. And generally with the co-ops we're talking about, there will be a member buy-in. These worker co-ops can range from, we've seen on average 500 to maybe 2,000 is pretty common for the smaller co-ops. And that basically what they're doing is they're buying in to become an owner and own a share of common stock in the company. And it can be paid in over time if the co-op is set up to do that. And what does that share of common stock do? It gives them, each member gives them 1 vote in the governance process and a right to receive profit sharing. And as far as that price range, these businesses can be worth millions of dollars. So you're buying in for a couple thousand. It's a very, very affordable. And so it's meant to be accessible. That's the point, is the membership should be accessible but still meaningful. And that share can be returned, the price you pay to buy in can be returned when you leave, as long as the co-op has the funds to do that. Because basically the co-op is buying that share back from the person. And next slide. Yeah, profit sharing. In a worker co-op, it's usually the net profit left at the very end of the day. Like everything else has been paid for, including wages, all the normal business expenses, any kind of debt that's owed, all of that gets paid out first. And whatever remainder there is can be split up amongst the owners, the worker owners. And in a worker co-op, that's typically based on hours worked. The vast majority, I'd say, of worker co-ops, it's like the more you work, the more of a proportion of the profit you might get. Of course, this is all balanced between all the members, right? But you can really use any formula that's equitable or treats everyone the same. So you could base it off of salary or production or other things, but that's more rare. Also, the co-op can decide how much patronage or profit sharing to give out, because, as a business, it has to retain some of it just for operating costs, and maybe if you want to invest in the business and grow, which is pretty important, I think, to stay on top of your game, right? So the co-op might not pay out all of its profits Oftentimes the board or the membership will vote on what is retained in the co-op. And not to get into too much technical stuff yet, but yeah, I mean, some of it can be retained and paid out over time later on. And some profit can just be retained permanently in an unallocated account that the co-op just holds on to. Let's see. Yeah, and as far as profit sharing, if the co-op is paying it out over, like, let's say you make a profit in 1 year and it's paid out over the next 5 years, that's called that money's held in their individual capital account. And yeah, can be paid out over time. Next slide. Startups. Is that me? Yeah. Okay. Talk a little bit about worker co-op startups. This is just the framework that our team, the Shared Ownership Center, uses. But basically, when we start to engage with a startup, we try to connect with them when they're already kind of laid out a business plan and have done financial projections. We also look for there to be at least 3 or more co-founders, a majority of whom are BIPOC. That there's a commitment to majority employee ownership, and typically that there are other partner organizations supporting the project. And these are just our criteria because our specialty is co-op governance. Our specialty isn't providing the business plan and the financial projections, at least for startups. And so what we're trying to acknowledge here is that the co-op has the other pieces needed to succeed and get started that we can't provide. And so that's sort of why these criteria exist. We can try to help connect co-ops to people that can do a business plan and stuff like that. But we're not currently, we just don't have the capacity, honestly, to do that right now. So it's just our unique criteria. Obviously, any startup that isn't going through SOCAN, the Shared Ownership Center, they still need to do a business plan and stuff typically, but anyways, yeah, so that's just our framework. Next slide. And what do we provide? I guess I covered this a little bit already, but we really specialize in doing training on decision making and governance for cooperatives, specifically employee owned and real estate co-ops. We can review business plans just to sort of make sure that it all aligns and seems like it will work out. We currently are not making them for startups. We can sort of walk a group through what we call co-op design. And that's laying out all the agreements that are needed to be decided for articles and bylaws. So when you register a new co-op, you'll have to file your articles. We can help kind of frame out what should be in those articles. How do you structure them? And usually we do that before it goes to a lawyer just to save time. Lawyers are oftentimes expensive and in short supply. So we try to do some of that work ahead of time before the lawyer gets involved. And then we continue to work with the lawyer if the group wants to get the co-op registered. And we do help advise on fundraising, but mainly we play a connector role. We don't you know, we don't have the ability to provide significant funds ourselves. We're just more advisors, trying to help find other sources of capital. And we then, you know, once the co-op is incorporated, we can help advise on sort of operationalizing the business plan and supporting the launch. So that's what we do. Next slide. And here's an example project that's still in the works, but pretty far along. Future Builders Co-op. They are they're a construction co-op. They're going to be doing commercial construction, probably starting with interior finishing work. And so they're a partnership with Unidos Minnesota, 100% Campaign, and a few other organizations. And yeah, their first project will probably be hiring new trainees from the Rise Center, which is starting in South Minneapolis. And some of those trainees, I believe, will be working on finishing the Rise Center. It's my understanding. So that's pretty exciting. And it's Latino led and owned currently. Next slide. As far as co-op transitions, worker co-op transitions, that's a term we use for when there's an existing business that maybe, let's say, is just owned by one person, like a sole proprietor. If that owner wants to retire, for example, and move on, they can sell the business to their employees, and the employees can buy it as a worker cooperative. So in that case, what we see working best is, you know, a business that has at least 10 or more employees, and has been successful as far as finances, because we don't want the employees buying a business that's struggling. It's too risky. That said, we have also, I was lucky enough to facilitate one example where the business had been founded under sort of a values-based orientation. And the owner didn't really even sell the business. He just basically gifted it to the workers, which was really awesome. And so perhaps there's other opportunities for either discounted sales or, you know, businesses getting almost gifted to the employees that, you know, could be opportunities when you're lucky. But generally, you know, the owners put in money, put in time to get the business going and successful, and they want to get paid back. So most of the time, these are sales. Next slide. Covered this a little bit, but again, you know, we don't want to just assume that an existing business is going to be a good transition candidate. So we do want to see that it's a healthy business with good cash flow. And oftentimes we do see value in the owner being willing to stay on throughout the process of transition, because they have a lot of historical knowledge and experience and information about the business that really helps the transition process. I already touched on having 10 or more employees. That's mainly because if you drop too low, you actually can't really technically have a co-op with less than 3 to 5 people. And so 10 just gives you a buffer. And also typically those businesses are really cranking, you know, they're really making stuff happen. So it's just kind of a rule of thumb for us. We also obviously want the employees to be interested. If the employees don't want to form a co-op and own the business, that's fine. But they wouldn't be a great transition candidate. For our work at Nexus, for, our mission, we focus mainly on businesses with 30% or more BIPOC staff, when possible. And then the ability to generate meaningful patronage for the new worker owners. So that's patronage again, that's profit sharing. We want the business to be successful enough where when we run our financial projections, we're like, yeah, you will get not only your regular wage, but likely some profit share within the next few years. It might not be immediate, but it's definitely needs to be on the horizon. Next slide.
Okay. So I'll be talking about other types of co-ops that I guess Nexus hasn't really, or Shared Ownership Center hasn't super supported, but may be of interest to some folks in the room. So the first one, artist co-ops. They're formed to provide a structure for artists to collectively market, display, and sell their work. They can share equipment and do wholesale supply orders for a bulk discount. So the example here is City Art Cooperative Gallery. They're in San Francisco. I had the pleasure of wandering in when I was in the Bay a few months ago, and it's really cool. They've been around since 1998. They've stayed in the Mission District, which has seen wild transformations and gentrification over the past couple decades. And I think they're on a weekly rotation with their artists. So they have like 300 artist members. And it's like a lottery basis of who can exhibit when. So once they're selected, they're invited. They jam pack this gallery in the wall space. Different artists, like vendors, so to speak. They have business cards, QR codes, etc. And you can purchase the art there, or connect and follow the artists individually. So it is a very cool space, and especially for it to be able to sustain San Francisco development. And then shared services co-op examples. So this could be a lot of different things. So our examples here for employers who formed alliances to buy healthcare insurance or to purchase healthcare services directly from hospitals and physicians. School districts organizing a cooperative to provide special education programs, as well as purchasing products like janitorial supplies for individual school districts. They could be hardware stores, restaurants, independent pharmacies, rural electric cooperatives, and natural food stores, forming shared service cooperatives that operate as wholesalers. So this example, the photo here is of Arizmendi Bakery. It started out as a bakery, and then it grew to 6 bakeries, and then it grew to a co-op of a co-op, where they now also have a landscape design and building cooperative and a development and support collective. So each bakery or each entity is a co-op, and then it feeds into the larger Arizmendi Association, and that itself is a co-op, where each entity is a member. Yeah, and Benjamin will talk about holding co-ops.
Yeah, we threw this one in there because we heard some folks in this group are doing one of these. So for you all, you probably for that group, they know this already, but for the rest of you, hopefully this is helpful. Holding co-ops are I would say, I don't want to say new, but there is sort of a new movement to try and do these. They've been around for a while. For example, Equal Exchange is a holding co-op in essence. They don't call themselves that, but they actually are. But in essence, what are these? This diagram hopefully kind of charts it out, and bear with me, they're a little bit complicated. But this is sort of the way that I describe them. So you have a holding co-op that owns subsidiary businesses. And in this diagram, you'll see it owns businesses A, B, and C. And with that ownership, it gets some share of the profits of each of those subsidiaries, goes up to the holding co-op. But the cool thing is that at each subsidiary, the employees there, they're actually members of the holding co-op, so the larger entity. So what that means is they get a share of those profits at the holding co-op level, as long as the holding co-op as a whole it has profits. So it's a pretty cool system of linking multiple businesses together. I find them really fascinating and exciting. I think there's a lot of pros to this model, in the sense that, for example, each of these businesses, A, B, and C, they're not just out there on their own trying to survive. They have this holding co-op as like a support partner. Hopefully the holding co-op is structured to provide all kinds of other back-end services like bookkeeping support or marketing, or maybe certain types of training. And it also can be kind of a source of funding, if you will. So if one co-op is doing really, really well one year and another isn't, it can maybe do some load balancing where that in the long term, what one would imagine helps kind of navigate the dips and dives of, business as usual. So they're really fascinating models. They're huge projects to try to get it off the ground. We're trying to do one, to be honest, in Minnesota. Nexus is trying to lead on one. And we aren't there yet, but it's a project in the works. And so we've done a lot of research on them. I think we might have one other slide on these. Yes, the Obron example. I'd say one of the more current and kind of strong example of a holding cooperative is Obron, and they do a couple different types of business. So they have subsidiary businesses that do temp staffing, and it's pretty cool. They help returning citizens come out and get jobs in temp staffing. And that temp staffing company is a co-op that's part of the Oberon cooperative. They do some healthcare services. I think that might actually be their biggest sector right now. And part of their model is they buy some of these businesses. They've done startups. The staffing was a startup, but the healthcare, they actually just bought a big healthcare company and brought in all those employees into their cooperative. They do a little bit of construction. They have a technology co-op, and I think linked up with the construction, they're working on owning real estate in Baltimore. And that real estate is, at least last I heard, it was focused on trying to provide affordable housing to their members. So it's a pretty cool kind of vision they have to kind of cover a lot of different bases and really support their members broadly. And to me, what's exciting is that if it works out at the end of the day, this co-op might be able to provide a lot more support to its members than like a smaller singular co-op by itself. So of course, every business has challenges. So, Oberon's still pretty new, but we're very optimistic that they're going to be successful.
There's a hand up, Benjamin from Chico.
Yeah.
Hey, Benjamin. Is Seed Commons providing the financing for Oberon Cooperative, or because I see you have Seed Commons here and credit services, so I just wanted to know the role that Seed Commons was playing.
Yeah, I think Seed Commons is helping maybe on two levels. I think they did provide some funding. I'd have to look through my notes. It's been a while. But I think they might also just help provide technical assistance on providing credit services to their members. I know that was one of their goals, at least. So I think Seed Commons has a couple different roles. As far as other sources of capital for Oberon, they bring in capital at a bunch of different levels. They've gotten investment and loans both at the holding co-op level, but also at the subsidiary level on a deal by deal basis. So when they go and buy a new business, they can actually pull in lending just for that deal.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
Does that help?
It's extremely helpful. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Illuminating.
Yeah, it's a fascinating model. It's there's a lot going on there. I got to tell you. And we've talked with Oberon. They're awesome folks. Definitely very dedicated to their mission of supporting their membership.
It's no, we're because my cooperative is a holding cooperative as well. So in the Wiz Connect.
Awesome. Yeah, so
And
you've
it
talked
is
with them?
it no, we've not. We've not. So that's partly why I was asking.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I
Thank you.
think, Deanna, do we have other slides? Or are we entering?
Yeah.
Oh, yep.
Our
Okay.
local fund plug. Yeah.
Are you covering that?
Yeah, I can. So local fund was launched earlier this year in partnership with the City of St. Paul Office of Financial Empowerment. It is 2.5 million devoted for co-ops in the City of St. Paul. So 1.25 is for worker owner co-ops, where the grants could cover technical assistance and trainings, business financial planning, and to establish a co-op business structure and governance. Grants could also go to stipends for members of the co-op, of startups and transitions. And then because this money kind of came through with the American Rescue Plan funds, there's some devoted to emergency financial hardship assistance grants for businesses impacted by COVID-19. And then business expansion. Did I say that? Business expansion or startup grants. Do you want to talk about the community ownership side, Benjamin?
Sure. Yeah. So we also have a side of the local fund called community ownership. And it's also focused just on the city of St. Paul. But it does a couple different things. It focuses on mainly commercial and mixed use real estate. But we can do feasibility assessments and technical assistance, both at an organizational level, but also for like particular sites, like particular pieces of real estate. And then there are grants. There's two types of grants we're hoping to be able to offer. Pre-development. So that's when you're doing commercial real estate, there's a lot of pre-dev costs, attorneys, environmental work, financial modeling, architecture, surveys, etc. So there's pre-development grants. Once a group has identified a property of interest that's eligible. And then if they make it through that and they get a purchase agreement, and everything's moving along, there's potential for acquisition, demo, and rehab grants. that yeah, could basically help with those three types of things. There are a few caveats to all of this because it's federal money. Lots and lots of like fine print. So we try to share some of the fine print ahead of time so people aren't surprised, but there's like some unique elements where the property may have to be held in trust or have a lien on it in order to get the ADR grants. And there's a lot of eligibility criteria that the feds put on this. So example, it's only commercial or mixed use properties in qualified census tracts in the city of St. Paul. As that's just one example of the criteria, and the building has to be vacant and on the city's vacant building list. So yeah, if any of y'all are in St. Paul and you're looking at this, happy to talk more about the details. You know, we're optimistic that some groups will be able to use this, but I also try to be real with folks that it's pretty narrow in some ways too, just because of where the money's coming from.
So yeah, so if you click on any of the pictures of our beautiful faces, it will take you to our local fund page, where there's more details on eligibility and a link to our info session that also breaks down local fund specifics. But this is our fun meme. So you can remember to tell your people interested in co-ops that there's money for them in the city of St. Paul. So yeah, any questions? Conversation? What are y'all thinking?
No questions. I'm just deep in. Actually, I shouldn't say no questions because we're working on our profit patronage formula. Yeah, exactly, Brianna. On our patronage formula, and any resources you could have, that would be great, because I mean, we've come up with a formula and we're not quite sure if that, we're like trying to test it out. We're trying to see and explain and test it out, especially when you're then going into, we have support on the taxation side, but it's then particularly relevant when you're then going into taxation of the members, the member businesses, and then the holding cooperative itself. So those are the complexities we're trying to work around. So any resources or you can point us to would be really.
Yeah, I can look around. I'm sure we have something on holding co-op patronage. But I guess just out of curiosity, just the basics, are you going to be trying to do patronage by hours worked or something different?
Well, we're doing it on a formula that includes the variable of hours worked, because since it's different businesses in different sectors, that's going to be a different thing. So what we currently have now is using the census tables and coming up with like a harmonized hourly rate, and then the amount of work that each business owner member puts into the operations of the of the holding cooperative. Part of it is, and then we've come up with that, because a straight dollar to dollar, the straight dollar to dollar actually isn't equitable. Yeah, it's easy to understand, but when you then start breaking it down into how the businesses, the sectors each business is in, and what that means for the market value, you know, the market value, the fair market value for the hours worked, it then becomes a different, you know, then it's not so
Mhm.
equitable. So
Huh. Yeah, I don't know if what we have will be helpful for you all, because we actually thought, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but we actually felt like one of the strengths of the holding co-op was that profit sharing would be equitable based on
Mhm.
hours worked across all subsidiaries, and that it's like a balancing factor. So if you're like a temp worker making a low hourly wage and you got a tech worker making a super high hourly wage, they actually have the same profit sharing based off of hours worked. For us, we thought that would be a pretty awesome equalizer between sectors. But I hear you. I mean, if you were the tech worker, you'd be pretty salty about that. But at the same time, we were like, well, that's our
Exactly.
mission, you know, that's our mission. And that's what we're going to try to set up. So, because we're all about like
Okay.
broad-based, equitable business. And the tech
Yeah.
worker is still making mad money on their like just market-based wage. They're just not getting a ton at the, or they're getting the same amount of profit sharing as everyone else. So whether they think that's a lot or not, I guess that's for them to decide. So that's
Well,
what we've set up. So I can share that, but I don't know if it'll be much help to y'all.
nah, please, because it can still be variables where we can have conversations around, okay, this is how it is equitable or how it isn't. And I think the thing is that because we're working with businesses, you know, many of the folks are entrepreneurs, you know, some are solopreneurs and some are yeah, you know, some are solopreneurs, some um uh you know, kind of like multifaceted businesses. But the thing is that revenue is going to look different from our solopreneurs vis-a-vis, you know, let's say, you know, our cafe. So it's, you know, it's that broad thing. And then to further complicate it is that we have, which may not complicate it, which may make it easier, but the co-op itself also owns real estate that it'll be leasing out to other businesses that are not necessarily part of the co-op. So it is, you know, so that's why it's like, okay, coming up with the right balance and mix of the variables to come up with, okay, here is the unit value for, you know, for your ownership share and thus for your profit share.
Yeah. No, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of different levels to it. And sounds like you all are definitely being thoughtful. Definitely sounds like a lot of there's like a lot of dials, you know, in these holding co-ops where you're trying to make everybody happy and
Exactly.
it's tricky.
I'd
But
like to
maybe
hear
one of the
more.
dials is
Exactly.
also just at the subsidiary level, because you can like, before it even hits the holding co-op, you can sort of have a filter for what stays in the subsidiary and what doesn't. So I don't know, something to consider.
Okay, that's definitely something to think about.
Hi, this is Charlotte. I'd like to hear more about the vacant property list for St. Paul. How does that work?
Yeah, so the city actually maintains this official list. It's on our website. You can find, or like the link is on our website. But it just basically lists vacant buildings in St. Paul that have applied to the program. So not every vacant building will be on there. The owner actually has to apply to get on there. But that's the list, and it only covers commercial properties. Does that answer your question?
No. What is the purpose of the list to approach? Okay, let's say you're looking for a building
Mm,
and the building is on the list.
mhm.
You approach the owners and negotiate the sale. Is that it? Or does the
Yeah.
city own these buildings?
Most of them are privately owned. I don't know. The city might own some of them. I actually don't know that. I can try to look that up. But my understanding of the purpose of it is some of it's very, very just very much about that when the city has vacant buildings and it's on the list, they prioritize the police and the various city agencies to keep an eye on it better because they view it as a risk for, I don't know, getting messed with, I guess.
So
That's
let's say
one
we found a
component of it.
building.
Sorry, go for
I'm
it.
sorry. So let me ask a hypothetical question. If we found a building on this list and we wanted to use it as a center for operating our nonprofit, could we come in and have a conversation with you about how to acquire the building? And are your services only for co-ops?
Yeah, this program is only for co-ops. So what would make your project potentially eligible is if you wanted to team up with a couple other nonprofits or a couple other businesses, like 3 or more, preferably 5 or more, then you could basically be trying to form a real estate cooperative, but you would need to be working in tandem with 3 to 5 or more other businesses or nonprofits. And you'd basically be looking at getting a multi-unit space that some of the members would hopefully move into eventually, and own it as a cooperative. That's sort of the classic scenario. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mhm.
If you want to see like a map of the vacant buildings, the commercial vacant buildings in St. Paul, this is a nice visual layout. And then it's categorized 1, 2, 3. 1 is yellow, 3 is red. As to like kind of like what state the building's in, what level of vacancy. So you can see the breakdown here. But what's nice if you're interested in looking at the different qualified census tracts and kind of diving into that, there's these lovely filters that you can turn on by clicking on the eye. And part of the eligibility is that if a building or group is interested in working in a qualified census tract, we'll accept 2021 to 2025. Those all apply. So it's
What do you
kind of
mean? What do you mean 2021? What are those? Are those like hub zones or something?
I mean it's 2021. So each year, HUD releases the qualified census tracts. And so they'll change a little bit year to year. So what's nice then by multiple years applying for this fund, you have a better chance of finding something that works. Bigger space, you have more space to work with.
There's more qualified census tracts if you look at all the different years. Yeah, to potentially choose.
Okay.
I've got to run here soon, but any other like last minute questions I can help field before I jump? Because we scheduled this until 11:15, so unfortunately I have another meeting I have to run to.
There's a follow-up question about real estate models, about the holding co-op real estate model. Do we know of any lenders or funders that could help finance commercial properties for holding co-op members for based in Chicago?
I mean, I'm sure you'd have a much better read than us, especially in Chicago. But I mean, there's always Shared Capital. You could always talk with them. They're a CDFI based here in Minneapolis or St. Paul, but I'm sure you've been directed to them because they're like the go-to for co-ops. You could maybe talk to National Cooperative Bank, NCB.
Yeah, we've spoken with them and we're speaking with them still.
Nice. Give me a second. Just trying to think if I can. Yeah, off the top of my head, I mean, Seed Commons, you could definitely try to talk to them. But yeah, I don't have a lot of others off the top of my head.
I should say I compiled some resources for folks, and the UW Center for Cooperatives, they have a directory for resources and co-op development by state, believe across all 50 states. So that could maybe be helpful for looking into funders or connections for Illinois.
But yeah, if I think of any others, definitely I'll try to circle back to Nikuli and Liana and get back to y'all. But yeah, we haven't, our holding co-op project hasn't gotten far enough to actually actively seek lenders.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, best of luck. I mean, in Chicago, you all
happy
are
to be the
talking
canary in the coal mine.
You're connected to Camille Kerr, right? In Chicago.
Yes, I believe we are.
Yeah, she'll know. She'll know.
I
mean,
okay.
Everything there is to know about that question. So if she has the time, she's super busy. So, hopefully she'll be able to field some questions. But yeah, she's like co-op superstar type person. So
Cool. Thank you.
yeah. Well, I gotta jump, but definitely keep me posted if there's follow-up questions I can help with.
Well, thanks. And are you guys okay if we share the SOCAN email as well?
Yeah, and the slide deck for sure.
Thank you both so much for being here this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.
Thank
Glad it worked
you.
out. All right, catch y'all later.
All right, take
Have a good
care.
one.
I think we're gonna take like a 5-minute break and then come back and maybe break out in small groups to debrief before we go into our larger break. So 5 minutes.
Yep.
Is
Can
a
pop-
Yep.
Sounds good.
11:30 Central Time.
All right, welcome back. I hope you had some great conversation. I know we have a few minutes before we transition, but if folks want to share any comments, maybe in the chat or briefly come off mute, I would say maybe the chat to capture some of that more. We can always revisit some of this later in our later large group discussion too. We'll have more space. I see Monica, your hand's raised.
I'll be super quick. I really enjoyed the conversation within our group. We mainly discussed how do we keep money amongst each other? When we need toilet paper, how could we avoid going to Costco and buy from a Black business? Because the last speaker from our last session was really inspiring for me. He said something like, you can be a part of a system without being of it. And it seems like a really good solution when you can't take down capitalism all by yourself. And how could we build networks amongst each other where we can support each other's businesses and keep the money amongst Black people.
Thank you. Any other final thoughts that want to go maybe in the chat or briefly off mute? I know we are at time here, but if there's anything you want to write or name, and I can lift that up. All right, I see Kat. Absolutely, Monica. I had the thought of creating a spreadsheet and in turn a website with local Black businesses.
Scarlett said the same thing.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I was talking about Kat's spreadsheet actually, because Kat, your spreadsheet was
Ah.
amazing. Yeah. So like, I mean, Monica already said it and Kat did as well. But yeah, there was this app that I was telling them in our smaller group that somebody tried to create, but it wasn't as successful, where the idea was you go into the app and you know, it'll like filter by your location. And so anywhere where you are, it'll tell you all of the Black businesses around. So you'll always have like the options of going to Black businesses, but the app wasn't very successful. There wasn't a lot of businesses going on there. So I was even thinking like, how can we like, if somebody's already doing it like Kat and she has a spreadsheet, how can we just add to her spreadsheet? And like, if I find toilet paper and somebody else finds, I don't know, washcloths, and somebody else finds a roofer that's Black, and then we just all keep putting like all of the stuff in there and collectively help them, but also help ourselves like go back into our community.
You remember that movie, The Green Book? Have you guys seen that movie? It's
I'm
how
familiar,
down
yeah.
south, when they travel, they'd have a book of places where Black people could stay and be safe. And I think that with all this threats on cybersecurity and how they're going to take us down and, you know, put us back to the Stone Age, we should do everything you guys are saying you want to do, but print it out and call it some kind of book just for us, so we have it in case the grid goes down and we know how to reach each other.
Good idea, Mom.
Yeah, the movie wasn't exactly about what it was, but that's what the Green Book actually is.
Thank you, everyone. Let's revisit some of these. I mean, we have our chat here open, so we can definitely come back to this. And since in the afternoon we'll be helping to steward and you all will also be in your groups, these things can be revisited. So let's break now for our lunch break. Come back at, let's say, 12:18. Since we are a little bit over, we'll still keep the time. So we'll come back to these comments and be able to discuss more later too. So you are free to break. We'll put our music on, slide on, but feel free to take the time you need, and we'll see you at 12:18 Central Time. All right, everyone.
Thanks. I see it in the chat. Cool. All right, we'll get started for our second session, our second portion of the session anyway. In this portion, we'll mostly be focused on study and an activity within your groups. If you don't have a group member, that's okay. We'll link you up with another group. But it's sort of going off of what was talked about this morning, but more specifically how you want to develop your own cooperative or enterprise. But I feel like before we dive into that, I sort of want to revisit some of the questions that were in the chat, maybe just to give space. I know we'll have another time at the end to sort of debrief as a group, but since it was more recent, yeah, what I just kind of want, okay, so for everyone that's coming back, we're going to spend a little bit of time sort of debriefing some of the questions that I saw in the chat, or if there's any other things that are still lingering before we go into the second portion of the day. So if anyone wants to come off mute or put it back in the chat. Some of the things that I saw earlier were thinking about what other cooperative structures that exist, especially if somewhat structures that are less formal or less structured than what was presented this morning. And there are for sure some cooperatives that are less structured or less formal. For our 6th session, we have a virtual cooperative tour where we invite a lot of Black cooperators. We try to match it to the co-ops that are in the space or some of the missions that are in the space. And so there'll be a space to sort of dive more into less structured or less formal. But cooperatives are so like a creative space. That's how I view them anyway. You can do so much with them. For example, there's Mandela Foods out in Oakland, which is a Black-led grocery store. One of the things that they did for the co-op was they did not like the rigid structure and approach, so they made up their own bylaws and their own rules essentially to mirror what was wanted in the co-op or what was needed. And one of the things that I love was that they got rid of Robert's rules because Robert's rules did not work for them. They don't use Robert's rules in daily language. And so they created a system or something else that more mirrors the co-op. So yeah, there are spaces to like really plug into creativity or plug in some of the work that you want or work that reflects more of you into cooperatives. And like I said, we'll have the virtual cooperative tour for session 6, and there'll be more examples of that. I just want to give maybe a few more minutes for anything that came up for anyone this morning. Maybe some parts were useful, some parts were maybe not applicable, and that's okay. But
one thing that came up in my group was resources for greater Minnesota and not just St. Paul. There are some folks that like would love to do more in like rural areas or I mean, even just the questions that were coming up about some of the fellows that are in different cities and just wondering like where we can get those resources from. I think that I don't know if Nexus is like has the capacity to like generate a list that is like greater Minnesota and like across the country of resources. I think that's what it was coming up for me earlier. I know that when we did our interview, we talked about resources in Minneapolis and resources in St. Paul. But if we like branch out with our cooperatives, like what does it look like to do more work in other places? But yeah, that's just some things that were on my mind.
yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing. I know that in that slide deck, Deanna had named a resource list for like TAs across the country. And then we also have other resources that we can sort of share, like Collective Diaspora is one. There's a Black cooperative technical assistance group. I don't think they have like I know it's like all on WhatsApp right now. I'm not sure if they have like a formal like website per se to share, but some of those cooperators or technical assistance providers come up from across the country. So they're more plugged into what might be available from whatever states they're in. So there's that, but yeah, for sure. I hear that. Thanks for sharing. Anything else before we transition to the next portion? And I believe Collective Diaspora is also working on creating like a directory of Black co-ops across the diaspora. So North America, South America, the Caribbeans, and the continent. But yeah. Anything else? Okay. We will have more time in the afternoon to sort of dive more into some more questions, if you have some. Definitely thinking about this session, previous sessions, and sort of what's left for us to come for the rest of the fellowship. But I'm going to transition us into an activity. I'm gonna share my screen briefly just for the first part, but you should all have the physical cards in your notebooks. I'm also gonna share a link for where you can find a slide deck of these cards if you don't have your folders available. So we're transitioning into what we call the cooperative development timeline. So it sort of looks something like this. Is my screen good? So essentially the cooperative development timeline was created to sort of like walk different groups through the different steps of developing a cooperative and some of the things that you might think about or might include in that work. And so I'm just showing a picture, but this is sort of the deck. I'm not, are you all able to either locate it on the slide deck that is shared in the link or in your folders?
I found it in my folder.
Okay, great. I will say that if you do have your folder, it will be great to use those physical cards that were printed out because you can sort of play around with them, and that's what we'll need for this activity. But I'm just going through it really fast right now, just because I want to share the instructions for it. Okay. If anyone is having trouble locating it, please let me know. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is the cooperative development timeline. It was created in partnership with the Toolbox for Education and Social Action as a tool, as I said, to help cooperators and cooperative developers like try to figure out the different steps needed to develop their cooperative. I will say that it's not just for co-ops. It could be used to develop any entities that are in North Star. So whether they're formal structures or informal structures, it's sort of helpful to just have a guide if you must. So this activity will help the participants sort of understand the different steps involved in developing a cooperative. We'll go through and analyze and discuss the different steps of development, but also really discuss like the values and the context in relation to the different steps that are involved in developing this cooperative. And the goal is to organize it into a timeline. And so as I shared before, there are multiple steps ranging from the idea to evaluation. And so the goal will be to be put into your cooperative groups to sort of walk through this process to figure out for your work that you're doing, for the work that you wanted to bring into North Star, what are the steps that you need to take for your own cooperative in order to develop it. If you're further down in the development, that's okay. There are some things that are still applicable in that as well. So it could be that you start from the idea or you start from evaluation. It's really up to you. So everyone has the cards, is that correct? Can I see a thumbs up? Yes, okay, cool. And so I'll put you all into groups and then we'll have about 30 minutes for you all to sort of really dive into this activity and figure out, like, as I said, what the steps are for your own work and what makes sense or what doesn't make sense. We have had some groups in the past like repeat different steps. That's completely fine. For example, one group put evaluation after each step. Another group put, I don't know, a business plan earlier or later in the steps. So it's really up to you. So just giving you the space to sort of work through your cooperative idea now. Are the instructions clear for the second portion?
Real quick, one more time. We're to take these cards and put them in the order that we think is most appropriate.
Most appropriate for your co-op work, yes, for the work that you want to do.
Okay.
Yes. So as you go through, just figure out like what most aligns, what doesn't align, and go through the steps to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, cool. Thank you, Liana. Okay, cool. The breakout rooms are open. We'll have 30 minutes, so we'll come back at 1 p.m. And if we see that some folks are not assigned, we'll just join them with a different cooperative group.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. Do you want to just use the time to work individually? I mean, because I know Gina said she was coming on later, so if
Yeah.
you wanted to get started and then if she joins, we can add her to your room. It's really up to you what you think is helpful. Because right now Keegan's also in a room by herself since Cynthia hasn't joined yet. So we can also pop in and like talk if you want to talk through it with one of us. But yeah, let us know what works.
I think maybe moving people to be with people. So like maybe Keegan with Joanna.
Because Venetia, she's here, but
Sorry, you guys.
Ooh. All right, let me just 1 second. So let's assign Nakara to room 4.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's 1. Let's see. 2. Okay, there's 3 rooms where people are by
Yes.
themselves.
That's,
I think it's up to Lauren because Lauren didn't want. Okay. Let me just pop in and check on oh, you're moved. Okay. Do you just want to move Lauren then? Or no?
yes. We're-
Okay.
Oh, I see. Oh, well, she hasn't joined, so I was gonna, if Gina comes back. But Gina's
Okay.
on, is at a game or something.
And then I can move Cynthia to room 8 as well.
I'm here, guys. I'm here.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. So, because we had you with someone, and then because you weren't, we moved them, but we can move y'all
Okay.
back together
Yeah,
if you'd
I'm sorry.
like.
I'm handling a business man, you guys. My organization has Toys for Tots, and I have to run around and I determined the listing today. So I'm running around grabbing people's lists and stuff. It's crazy, but I'm here, guys.
Okay. So we can just add you to that room and you can join if you're able to, when you're able to.
You can add me now.
Okay, I'm just gonna add, let's see. Do, 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 do. Mm. Mm. Okay. Okay, Lauren, I see your comment. You can feel free to just start working by yourself on it then. Can still join the room if you want. But yeah, you can start working solo then. Thanks. Sounds good. Okay. Venetia, are you good? I know you've been on, but we just haven't seen you, heard from you. Just want to check in.
So am I in a breakout now? I tried to hit join.
Okay, so you should just be able to join the room. We have you in room 8, so you just have to click join and it should take you. So it's saying that you've been invited, but you haven't accepted
It went.
it.
That's because the thing went away. When it says join, it went away.
All right. I have you in the room, so I'm not really sure why it's doing that. Let me see. Can you see when you click on breakout rooms, what's happening for you? Do you see that option at the bottom? I'm not sure what device you're on, but
Only screen I see is you, but there's another screen, but there's, I don't know.
Okay, so you on our end, we see that you've been assigned to the room, you just haven't joined it. So
Okay,
I think,
that's because the thing went away.
yeah, so there should be an option. Are you on a laptop, a phone? That'll help me be able to help a little bit better to know what device you're on. Okay, looks like she figured that out. Okay. Recording.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Are there some initial reactions? I'm also going to start putting questions in the chat. But are there some initial reactions that people want to share before we go into like a reflective feedback based on the conversations that we had in the groups?
Well, for us,
gonna
we
kick-
decided. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna get over to Brianna.
Oh, sorry, Chipo. Okay, so we are responding back to like what we talked about in our section, correct?
Yeah, I'm just asking if there are some initial reactions or that you had after completing the development timeline.
Yeah, so I'm really excited because I got a chance to speak with Chipo and just, come to this alignment that we wanted our process to go back more to starting with trust. We so in 2020, that's when the initiative started, and so we're 2024 now. And of course, we're trying to get to the work of getting financing and getting getting the different companies involved into the organization and kind of trying to build out the structure. But we were talking about how we realized that like when meeting with the different businesses, one thing that keeps happening is that this lack of us being able to dignify one another is missing. And so how could we do that is by starting at trust. And then for us to even go further back to be able, because we're working with different businesses that have already been established. So they know how to operate within the capitalist structure very well. So in order for us to actually make sure that, pitch the model to everybody, make sure they're fully invested in it, we have to also do the market research and the like the feasibility work to showcase, like basically we have to showcase the numbers of why this works so that we can start building people, having people come back to one, why did you join us in the first place? And this is how it can look. Your reasoning for joining in the first place is because you want your business to look differently, and this is how it can look differently. And this is also to this bigger, making sure that everybody is on one accord in terms of we're structuring this differently because we want to build something that works for us now and also to our communities and also to future generations, because we know what's being created now doesn't work. So for us, we're in the last part. We're in the governance structure part, but we got to go back to the basics. And so for us, going back to the basics is basically making our case for why we need to be where we are and why we need to be formed the way we are right now. So that's what me and Chipo was able to, like, that was our first insights in terms of just like our development timeline. We want to go back to the basics.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else have anything to add or initial reactions or like thinking more about like how does this process sort of inform your individual projects? Or how this process informs your work, if at all it did. If it didn't, that's fine too. Please share.
Well, we went through all the cards and we're a 501c3. We found that there was some things that didn't apply, but some things that were very helpful. We already do have a business plan and some of that stuff. Some of it we're running up against one at a time as we get through the process, like the barriers and stuff. I was telling Chipo in our first breakout session about how we located a couple of different properties that we thought might be ones that we could use, but we ran up against the community itself didn't want supportive housing in their neighborhood. And then a couple of weeks ago, we found another location, but then they already have a supporting housing thing within a certain number of feet, so they can't have another one. But there were other things about trust and about the ethics of what we're doing. Those are things that we could go back and extrapolate out a little more on. We have some things, but the cards really brought into focus about how important that is, because like we have a mission statement and a goal statement, but still there were elements missing in that that didn't really cover the ethics of what we're doing. That's something that corporate America doesn't get around to that until they've been in business for 50 years and they've already done all the corporate greed they want to do, you know? So doing that up front really sets the tone for how you operate moving forward right out the gate. So that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Charlotte. That's really helpful to hear. Nakara shared in the chat, overall, I believe it was helpful for us to begin fleshing out and organizing our ideas, compartmentalizing the steps we need to take. Yeah, I'm glad that was helpful in that way too. Lauren, for my group in our co-op, we're in the beginning stages of everything, and I felt like there's a lot of information and questions on the cards to dive into and answer. Like we have our idea, we've done market research and even a bit of feasibility, but I feel like the cards had a lot of areas to direct your focus to. The cards are definitely helpful with organizing thoughts. Cool. Thank you for sharing. And we'll be diving into feasibility we'll talk more about what the schedule looks like, but we'll be talking about feasibility next year too. So I hope that will be helpful. I'm just wondering, are there any particular phases that I sort of heard this maybe mentioned a couple times, but are there phases that you are all excited about undertaking? Or are there any phases in this development process that you are excited to work through?
Are you talking about for our projects?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys know this is Cynthia. So my initiative is a housing cooperative initiative. And I'm taking my first HMIS, which is Homeless Management Information System training. And I guess that's stuff that you have to know because with the nonprofit or just to help homeless people or help people get housed, the unsheltered, you have to know the information system for the coordinated entry system, and just learning that and try just getting more knowledgeable about it. I'm excited about that because that's a step closer to reaching my goal and providing housing to people.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
And I'm doing Toys for Tots. I got Toys for Tots for the Marines this year. So I've been like kind of overwhelmed, but a good overwhelm.
Thanks for sharing, Cynthia. And And then maybe I'll add this because we're sort of nearing the end. In addition to thinking about any phases or anything that sparked ideas as you were doing this, are there any phases that you would change, that you would add or change as you're doing this work too? Or any other thoughts you had as you were all talking? Yeah, please feel free to share, have conversation amongst each other.
Well, me and our breakout room, we had a powerful discussion.
Want to share?
What? Tell us.
We were talking, so basically we were talking about how like so we want to create generational wealth, but we want health and wealth, meaning that the way that the environment is, the way the condition of the human spirit nowadays is like this whole world needs healing. And then somebody, I don't know who it was, that I can't remember the name, but a little bit of the Maslow theory came in where like people need to be housed, they need to be fed, and they need to have clothing, just the basics. Once the basics starts, they'll feel compelled to do more. And being a Black woman, coming from a family where they didn't know things about business, or we really didn't get the nurturing or get the teaching where really about a lot of stuff. I'm just gonna keep it 100, about a lot of stuff, and how the whole system with the education and with the mental health and nurturing our children, it needs to change. It needs to change because we want to create generational wealth, but if you created it and they don't, there's no way for them to keep the concept going in their minds where, you know what I mean? I don't know how to say it, put it into words, but in order for us to come together and to create generational wealth, we have to prepare and get them ready, like our ancestors. Like my grandma used to, like, I swear my grandma, she used to clean up for a lot of European Caucasian people, and she talked to me the whole time and she taught me things. That was in the South. So when they would come to our house, I would run and go hide my toys, because when we're at their house, I can't touch nothing. And I didn't understand as a child because my grandma didn't want me to break it or anything. She had to pay for it. But she would tell me, you go back and you get that right now. Just because they like that, you don't be like them. You know what I mean? So yeah, I understand. She taught us those morals. My grandma did. Once my mom came and got us and brought us to, it was a whole nother world, but healing is possible. And I feel that in order for people to get, once generational wealth is created, we need to be able to sustain it. And part of sustaining it is we have to mentally prepare our clans, our offspring. You know what I mean? Y'all get what I'm saying? Because it's a lot of broken spirits, a lot of broken souls, a lot of broken, the world's broken right now.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, Victoria.
And healing is possible.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia, for bringing in like our basic needs into this conversation and how do we translate that into more together. We can do more together than we can apart, and we can thrive even when we only have a little bit to offer to the community. We can thrive if we have community, right? Because everybody can bring their little rock to rock stew. And so what we are looking to do, and how those slide decks and phases, I think, were helping us, is we're looking really to satisfy that social need for expanding community and family, relations in rural community as Black folks. And so Jackie and Heather and I and several others are looking more to do like a social club based on like a church, as opposed to offering a product or service. So we really want to offer fellowship and support to one another in where we have chosen to live our lives out. And so to me, that is equally important, to have that community that is loving, kind, supportive, culturally meaningful, and that validate who we are, where we come from, and allows us to just be. And so with this conversation that we got to have today, we were able to identify what we might need to pull from all of these different phases to get more focus. We already are registered with the state. We have an EIN number. Now we just have to figure out, how are we going to support this social club, this church? Like, how are we going to what are our membership dues and fees going to look like, so that we can do the things we want to do together? And so that was really good for us to have that conversation. And ultimately, when all is said and done, Black folks throughout Minnesota, hopefully, will be able to tap into this collective, Onyx collective, so that they can be like, oh, there's some Black people things happening here, there's some Black people things happening there, and I can join it. That's family. I don't know them yet, but that's my family.
I love that. Thanks so much for sharing. For sure. I see some hearts and I saw some claps too while you were talking, so it's resonating. I also see in the chat, Nakara said we added a recruiting phase, also creating measurements as sub-phases to evaluate each effort. And Vanessa responded, yes, recruiting, we're always talking about how we bring in more people and it's hard. Does anyone want to talk more about that, or come off mute to talk more about the recruiting? Because I'm super interested in that. I saw that and I was like, that sounds fascinating and needed.
I can share what we've done in our process, and it was initiated through a survey of all things. Victoria wants people. Victoria wants friends, and Victoria wants relationships. And so I'm pursuing that in a real specific and intentional way as to who I want to be around. And so this summer, I did a survey that went out to everybody in our area, but I was looking specifically for Black folks to respond. And so a few Black folks did respond. Heather and Jackie, whom I did not know until then, drove an hour to come to an initial meeting so that we could start talking about what we need in order to support one another from a survey.
Wow.
So it really is being for me, and I guess I would invite Heather and Jackie to share why they chose like to respond to some random survey and then drive an hour to engage with complete strangers, and how we got to here.
My daughter made me do it, and I'm glad that I did, because I was reluctant to do it because I was like, what if this is like a scam? I'm like, and nobody shows up and we're like the only ones there. But when we got there, they came out there, they greeted us, they made us feel very, very welcome. And ever since then, it's been, I'm very glad that I joined. Because living in our area, there's not a lot of Black people. We live in Starbucks, so yeah, I could probably count them on my fingers. And after that, and I've learned a lot from this group, and I'm very glad that I joined. Jackie, go ahead.
Hi. I guess I was pretty reluctant to go at first, and that's why I invited my mother to sign up and come along as well. It did in turn out to be a really good networking opportunity. I've made some great connections, and I guess I can consider some new lifelong friends.
Great. Thank you so much all for sharing. I feel like we could definitely get into more conversation about this, and I'm loving this. And we can still continue it in this next iteration. I'm not letting it go because it's all like part of the through line, part of the thread. But yeah, thank you so much for participating in this cooperative development timeline. Please feel free to use it as you continue your cooperative work. Even once you're established and up and running, I think it's a really good resource and it's cool to go back to and revisit, either for this cooperative work you're doing now or for other projects. But yeah, if any other questions come up, just let us know. We're happy to engage. I'm going to pass it to Liana to sort of steward us through the next section. Like I said, everything's a through line, so everything is still connected, but just moving us forward.
Thank you, Nikuli. So we wanted to spend some time reflecting. We've moved through now, this will be our 4th session, starting with, storytelling and space setting, Black feminisms and cooperative principles and values, to rethinking capitalism and solidarity economy and Kwanzaa, up until today, where we started talking about cooperative and ownership structures and the development timeline. And so we wanted to make some space for some reflection with folks. So we'll be in small groups just to reflect like where we are in this journey now, in this fellowship, moving through, knowing that, this journey isn't linear, that it's cyclical, it's iterative, and just wanting to make space for folks to connect about what's coming up for you, what's coming up in your group, what's coming up in terms of things you'd like to explore more. As Nikuli said, our next sessions, we're looking ahead to feasibility, thank you, and cooperative plan, virtual co-op tour, financing, and the rest that are listed in the chat here. So we want to spend about 10 minutes just in some reflection, like Charlotte was naming, we going within right now, really, to really process and understand and connect. So we'll be in some small groups, probably 3 folks or so, 10 minutes just to really reflect where you're at in this journey. And then we'll come together and move through our closing and everything. So open up those rooms now, and you'll have about 10 minutes to just reflect with each other. So 1:35, we'll come back. And I will pause the recording.
Came up in this. Some of the things that came up in the survey are then reflected in the following sessions. So please take that. Also, just hearing this conversation and just taking it in, I'm really grateful to be able to share space with all of you and agree. And I'm grateful to be able to fumble and mumble through all of this because it's not going to be perfect. But I'm grateful that we're all, together in this, trying to figure it out. And it won't look perfect, but we'll try, we'll work towards something that feels good for everyone in a way. And yeah, this is why we also offer different ways for people to show up, whether it's, speaking out, the chats, the small groups, etc. So we can still play around with that to figure out like what are the things that deeply connect with people in a resonant way, but also in a way that feels good. Announcements. This is our final session for this year. We'll resume again in January, so please take some space, take time. I hope you're able to all get the rest that you truly deserve. Yeah, because it's been a year in many ways. So yeah, and maybe some final. Did you have a closing that you wanted to do, Liana?
Not really, just a 1-word checkout. Folks want to drop it in the chat or come off mute briefly, either one. So yeah.
Healing and growth. I have to go.
Thank you, Cynthia. Feel free to drop it in the chat. Just a 1-word checkout. Few words if you have a few. See virtual hugs to all. Peace and love from Jessica. Gratitude from Victoria. So grateful for this group from Monica. 2 words from Shania. Be well. Grateful, Nikuli. Channel the ancestors, Chipo. Ishe, grateful. Vegan Nourished. Lauren, thank you. I saw someone off mute. If you wanted to say something, feel free. Thank you. Thankful to be a part of this group. Thank you from Heather. Scarlett, tired but grateful.
I left my comments in the survey. I thought it was well done, very well, professionally done. I learned a lot. I didn't know that a holding company could be a co-op, and I didn't know that you could convert a for-profit regular business into a co-op. So those gave me some ideas.
Thank you, Charlotte. And content. Any other words that want to be dropped for how you're feeling as we transition? Gratitude from Gina. Thank you. Vanessa, hopeful. Thank you.
I feel like I wanted to do this earlier, but I forgot. Like a shout out to Gina for all her incredible like art that we keep using, showing up. Love that.
Thank you, Gina. Yes,
People saying they're tired.
I love that. All right.
Yes. Thank y'all. Love seeing y'all. We'll see you next year. Yeah. Be safe, keep safe, be well. See you
All right.
soon.
Enjoy the season, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, see you in 2025.
Gosh.
Thank you, Shania.